clock says it's time to start, so let's start, all right? This morning I saw Bill Roach as I walked in, and I said, I brought a prop with me this morning for my lesson. And I'm not talking about a propeller. I'm talking about a prop, like a movie prop. Anybody in here ever seen one of these things before? No? I didn't think so. Unless you were a welder, you don't know what this thing is. Well, I've been seeing this little device on sale in different places on the internet. I've seen them anywhere from $9 a piece all the way up to $50 a piece, depending on how fancy you want to get. But this is about as fancy as it gets. And for months and months and months, years, I said, I need to get one of those things. I don't even know how it works, but I want one. Okay? So, I looked at it, and I'm one of these people who has the ability to unwind something in my mind. So I took this and designed it out on a flat piece of paper, drew it with a pencil, kind of guessed at the measurements, and then I took that piece of paper and I folded it up the way it needs to be folded. I'll go pass this around so y'all can see it. Okay? And eventually, I got this thing put together, and it works just like somebody else designed it. Amazing, huh? So, well, it holds, for the type of welding I've been doing, it's called TIG welding. And it's got a cutting torch or a welding torch on the end of it, and it looks kind of like a T. Well, what you do is you stick part of the handle through there, and then it leans back like this, and then part of the handle up here grabs onto this surface. It's like almost like hanging up a phone. If anybody remembers what it's like to hold onto a phone. So anyway, I just brought this to you, and I thought I'd just pass it around, and you can admire my handiwork, but it's not my design work. I just got lucky and unfolded it in my mind, and here it is. I just thought I would show you that because I wrote this statement, a couple of weeks ago. And last week, I kind of covered the same ground because there were so many people here that were new to the topic we've been speaking on. I covered that over again. So here's the topic. It says, when designing something, a designer puts a lot of thought into getting the design as correct as possible for its intended purposes. And trust me, I've laid waste to a lot of metal, a lot of wood, different things like that, cutting tools, because I didn't get the design right the first time. Sometimes you have to do what they call an iteration. You have to do this 3 or 4 times. Oh, and let me back up for just a second. On that piece that's being passed around, I chose that particular material. It's aluminum, and there's a magnet glued to it. But I chose that because about 6 months ago, a friend of mine showed up and he said, here's some scrap aluminum. You can just have it. So I wasn't willing to pay the $9 plus shipping to buy this thing. So I used scrap material, a little brain power, and a few minutes of sweat, so to speak, to make the thing. It took me about 2 hours to make the thing, start to finish, not including the time it took to paint it and dry it. So with this, let me repeat this. He says, when designing something, a designer puts a lot of thought into getting the design as correct as possible for its intended purpose. Well, let me add this. Elements and animals behave as designed, don't they? There's not a whole lot we can do with an element to change it. In fact, this thing right here is a testament to how far the human mind can go to do things. The circuit board that's in these things, you can't even see parts of the circuit board because it's down almost at the atomic level. It's so small now. None of us in here have the ability to see an atom, much less the particles of an atom. Yet they behave exactly as the Creator designed them, don't they? How about animals? Dogs behave like dogs, don't they? Cats behave like cats. How many animals have actually quit behaving like they were designed? We might get mad at a bear that mauls somebody, but isn't that bear doing what it was designed to do? You think about animals. How often do they get off course, so to speak? So to continue what I wrote a couple of weeks ago, I posed this question. Does it stand to reason that humans do as they were designed? Does it stand to reason that humans do as they were designed? Don't we? Don't we? Does that seem like a problematic statement in your mind? Well, you think about it for just a minute. Do we not behave the way we were designed? Now, I know there's exceptions to the rules. You know, something happened in the womb. Other things like that, other problems like that. But as a rule of thumb, for those of us that are in here, do we not behave the way we were designed? Well, ask these questions. I designed the question for you to think, to use this thing up here, not as something to watch TV with or, something on the phone, any of the distractions away from the real thing. We're designed to think. We're designed to make choices, aren't we? We're even designed to design. Wow. Thank goodness for the person that thought about the wheel. What if we had wheels that were triangles? There's this crazy guy in Russia. He's got a website called, I think it's Garage 54. That's what it is. The guy actually designed a car and he put triangular wheels on it just to see what it would do. This guy does all sorts of crazy things to cars. And they're Russian cars. The poor things, they're not very good cars, but they'll put up with a lot of punishment. Let's just put it that way. So, go back to that question that we've had. What's our worst enemy? Who is the enemy? Absolutely. Wow. He set up a lot of rules. He set up solid, concrete rules. He's the designer. It's the reason why I call him the creator.
But we think about, or a lot of us, or I did, thought about creation and something, okay, you do it, it's done, you put it on the shelf, and it's it. But it holds them together.
Who's got the front row seat to watch it? Who's got the front row seat to watch it work? Is it working the way I designed it? I suggest to you, yes, it is. Okay? Well, let's just skip over to this week's main event. Okay? Started last Saturday. Didn't say much about it last week. Well, what do we have here? What do we have in that situation? We have something that, a law that was given, but it's been since superseded, and we'll come to that in just a little bit. You think about that. Some people call it the law of reciprocity. Okay? In other words, repayment. Gee whiz. Just think about that just for a little bit. I'll just give you the teaser, an eye for an eye. What do you do when you have an enemy that says, you will do as we say, or as I say? You will be my slave. If you refuse to be my slave, I'll kill you. How do you deal with an enemy like that? What happened to Jesus? you're my enemy. If you won't bow before the throne of Rome, we'll see to it that you're killed. So who's the enemy? We become our own worst enemy, don't we? Let me read you something that Charles Barkley wrote, I don't know how many years ago, or William Barkley, sorry, not Charles Barkley, sorry. The man or the woman, and he just wrote man, but I'm substituting woman in there for those of us that are really sensitive in here. The man or the woman who knows that God is at the end of the road will make life a preparation to meet him. I suggest to you that you're in here, most of you are in here as a result of making that decision. And part of that decision, whether you like it or not, is I'm scared of what will happen in judgment if I don't behave myself. Why would I make those why would I say something like that? What drove you to baptism in the first place, or to become baptized? I remember I was afraid of dying. I'll freely admit it. Who's number one in your life? Well, usually that's one of the biggest problems we have is yourself. How do you put yourself behind to serve somebody else? For those of you that are long-term married, how often do you sacrifice for the person that you married, male or female? How often do you take it out on the person that you married? A little grumpy. Last night I was a little grumpy. My wife just went on to bed. No kiss goodnight, nothing. Just going to bed. Glad you went to bed. Okay? So, if we think about this, and we think in terms of, am I my own worst enemy? So, the title on this lesson, and I'm going to continue this lesson for a little while, it's called The Weapons of Spiritual War. You ever thought about what the weapons of spiritual war are? What is the best weapon that you can have? God's Word? Absolutely. How about truth? Is God's Word not truth? What's the opposite of truth? Who sits on the other side and tells the lies? My dad used to have a saying, he says, those two guys are like two guys standing in the middle of the road, and each one of them's calling each other a liar, and they're both glad the other guy's a liar. We watch TV news. Switch the channel. Oh, on channel whatever, they're lying. Channel so-and-so, that channel's lying. Well, who do you believe? Where do facts come from? What do facts do for you? Human behavior. Look at the facts. Look at the facts. In my notes, I wrote down, bad weapons should spawn good weapons. Why would I make a statement like that? Let me back up just a little bit. Why do I keep using, and I just use it in this statement, why do I keep using the word W-H-Y? Why? So we can think. You know, when we were little, I've heard it before, my daughters came up, why? Why, Dad? Why this? Why? And finally you just kind of like, hey, be quiet, I don't want to hear anymore. And you kind of get to the point where you don't ask why. Well, designers get back into that situation. Why? Why do I need this? Why should I design this? A lot of people just design things these days just to make money, which is okay, up to a point. But why? Bad weapons should spawn good weapons. What do you think? What do you think? What's the extension all the way out on this? Try to find another one. Let me read from my notes here right quick. Recognizing that there is a flaw in the design. Recognizing that there's a flaw in the design. Poor design. Materials. What causes the poor design? It does not do what it was intended or designed to do. Should I redesign it? I've been in that situation more times than I can count. I can't remember how many times that I've had to redesign something that I thought, got it, no problem. And you get right down to the very last detail and oomph. Tom sat over here and he was an engineer for a major company here in the United States for a pretty good while. And I can guarantee you, he had a lot of designs that came across his desk and he said, can't do that. Can't do that. Well, why not? Well, one, it costs too much money to do. Number two, right here, this resistor will cause the whole thing to burn up. Or whatever. I just use an electronic thing on that. Are we bad weapons? As human beings, are we bad weapons? Can be. Up to a point. When you went into the baptismal waters, what were you trying to do? Get rid of the bad weapon part of things? Is a bad weapon the guy that stands here and he argues with the guy from the Baptist church? They get into a heated argument about some little thing in Scripture. How far do you go to stand up for the truth? That's kind of the point behind making that statement. How far are you willing to go to stand up for truth? To the point of death? We had one individual for sure that did that. I think of the Romans, the poor people that were used as torches for light for the emperor's party. They stood up for truth. Recognizing that there's a flaw in the design. Well, I suggest to you that there is no flaw in the design. We behave exactly as we were designed to behave. Move it just a little bit more. What's the purpose of a weapon? What do you use a weapon for? What if the burglar breaks in at night and you have no way to defend yourself? Can the burglar go ahead and steal? Can the burglar probably harm you, especially if it's a big burglar, it can overpower you? What would stop that burglar? Does anybody in here think that we're ever going to stop burglars in this world? Is there ever going to stop? I should say, anybody think that we're ever going to stop having burglars in the world? It's been a constant, hasn't it? One of the first burglars that I can think of was Eve. You think about it. What did she steal from the rest of us? And Adam, the two of them together. But what came before that? Who was the real thief there? When you spawn an idea in your mind, which direction do you take it? The direction you know you should take it, or the opposite direction? I use the example of me and Carrie walking into the Walmart parking lot that one time, and here comes this scantily clad woman out, quite beautiful woman, and we both were giving her the eyeball. And I just kind of nudged Carrie and said, "What you looking at?" And he knew exactly what I meant when I told him that. Because I had already thought of it about myself. To be a better weapon, what kind of tools have you been given to make the proper judgment call? Where do they come from? They come from here, don't they? Well, how are you going to know this if all you do is come up here and listen to me or BC or Carrie or whoever once a week? And you walk out of here and you don't remember what was said 5 minutes after it was said. So what's your weapon? What's your weapon? Hint, hint. What is your weapon? It's truth, isn't it? Well, does truth rely, gee whiz, can you reach down and grab a pocket full of truth? Where does truth reside? In your mind. Does anybody in here doubt that we are in a spiritual war? I don't doubt it. You can watch two people or two peoples over there willing to lose their lives, tear everything they've got to shreds, and drag probably the rest of the world into it. And for what purpose? One believes the good, one believes the bad. It's, again, for someone that actually has read the Bible, studied it, it's one thing to read it, but it's another to contemplate and study it and learn what is this thing telling me. You can have all this stored up here in your head, but it's useless if you do not apply it. And who's the first enemy you should apply it to? Yourself. You can't get around the rules. Over the series of the next 2 or 3 lessons, that's what we want to do, is we want to take a look at application of these rules. Because who's kidding who? Who's lying to who here when it's right up here in your own mind? I'll just take a look at that woman over there and... Who's kidding who here on this sort of thing?
Kelley, you asked a question a while ago about which way we're going to take it when something comes up. And I think that's the difference, right? Is having that knowledge, knowing that truth, but embedding it in our heart to change the way that we think and what we prioritize. And then hopefully, when we've done that well enough, we don't get to that thought process of which way am I going to take this. Hopefully, at some point, we've got God in our heart enough, and we're willing to give of ourselves that when things do come up unexpectedly, that our heart's going to take us in that right direction.
Absolutely. That's one of the nails that I'm trying to drive into people's minds here. This becomes almost like an auto reflex. The auto reflex being, I want to do the right thing to please my Creator. Not just to get myself to heaven, but to show that I'm willing to please my Creator at whatever expense I've got to go through. Okay? And BC's very correct about what he's saying here. It's like there's a term called an autonomic reflex. If someone throws a bowling ball at you at 50 miles an hour, are you just going to stand there and watch it hit you? Or are you going to move out of the way? Dodge the bullet, so to speak. Okay? So, here, I have this note to it myself. It says, and I will get to a couple of scriptures here. I'm trying to work my way to it, but I'm setting all this up so that you'll pay attention. That's one of the hardest things for a preacher to do, is get you to pay attention for the 25 or 30 minutes that you're here without boring you to death or losing your attention. Because trust me, standing up here, you can see it. Especially for the guy that's kind of like, I myself have been victim of that several times. Usually I'm pretty chipper on this, but one time before Kelley left, I remember he was preaching, and I don't know what happened to me that morning, but I'm lucky I didn't fall out of the pew. The purpose of weapons: to defeat those who oppose you and want to capture and use you for their purposes. Well, who are you actually opposing here? Who slipped in on Eve and said, and used the word not? Remember, I've given that lesson before. Not, N-O-T. You will not die. Now what happened? We know Eve grabbed it. Oh, it looks great. Here, Adam, you take one too. Can you imagine what the devil was doing? Looking over at the Creator and going, ha, I told you I could get it done. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But way back in the recesses of the human beings' minds, do we not do the same thing? Do you kind of mock your Creator? You ever had that happen to you, been mocked? It's not a pleasant feeling, is it? It's one thing to joke around. It's another to hide the joke and be serious about what you're saying. You follow that? Be careful with this. In Exodus 20, we get a list of commandments, key commandments on how to behave. Maybe you might call it the top 10. Is anybody in here, can you tell me what's the first one? You shall have no other God before me. Because why? There's that question, W-H-Y. Because why? What are all false? Oh yeah. I am the only God. I am the God that created you. I could uncreate you if I so choose. And He's told us He will do that. Okay? Or, yeah, absolutely. We went over that last week. I created you, and this is the way I want you to behave. You may not like it, but this is the way I want you to behave. Exodus 20. Let's just turn over there right quick and just run real quickly through these things. I've been to Exodus 20 so many times I got a crease in my Bible that won't go away. Just flip it open and there it is. Verse 2, Exodus 2, verse 2. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Verse 3, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. That's 1 and 2. 3, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. Verse 8, that's number 3. Number 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. I thought about this yesterday as the Israelis were just bombing the snot out of the enemy. On what day for them? What would have been the day? Saturday, the Sabbath day. Not long back, I had a discussion with a relative of mine. I asked him, what's the first day of the week? And he goes, oh, Monday. You think that's been a lost sight on the millions of us that live in the United States now? What is the first day of the week? today. Okay? So, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. For those of us that are old enough, remember when they rolled in the sidewalks on Saturday? We had the blue laws in place. You just forgot about going to the store on Sunday, going to get a hamburger or anything else. But look at what's happened now. It's all crept into what? And as it follows, we got rid of that. And look at our behaviors in this country now. Do I need to make any comment on that? 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with me, or stays with you. For in the 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. The fifth commandment, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord God gives you. Number 6, you shall not murder. Number 7, you shall not commit adultery. How many of us in here know or have heard of an adulterer? It's a fairly common occurrence, isn't it? It's so common that it's right here in the commandments. Verse 15, the 8th commandment, you shall not steal. Verse 16, commandment 9, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Politicians are fond of that one, aren't they? But are politicians the only ones? Verse 17, the 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male servant or his female servant or his ox or his donkey or anything that belongs to your neighbor. His stuff or her stuff. You shall not covet it. If you want it, go out and work for it. Do what you got to do, but don't steal it. Don't commit murder for it. Do the right thing. So, another note that I wrote is, how is your character defined and or shaped? When I say character, I'm not talking about some cartoon or something. Your personal character, how is it shaped? Parents do a lot of it. Schoolmates do a lot of it. Once you get out of school, how are all these things, how is your character actually shaped? Well, part of it's due to the decisions that you make, the things that you know, your character. You know deep down in your heart, are you trustworthy or not? How trustworthy are you? Someone will know at the end of your days. That's for certain. Your character is defined or shaped by the decisions that you make. And that comes back to, and you guys have heard me hammer you so many times on this, because I hammer myself constantly on this one. James 1, verses 14 through 17. Just flip over there right quick and read it. Some people, this is a bitter pill for some people to swallow. Well, let's just pick up in verse 13. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. And then there's a key statement made in verse 16. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Who's going to deceive you? You're the one making the decision. Should I turn on the porno channel or not? Who's deceiving who if you turn that channel on? I'll stop right there. Next week, we're going to dive into something, and it may seem kind of silly on the surface, but it will serve a purpose. In fact, if you would, let's see here if I got ready recall on this right quick. We'll just spend just a moment here. Well, let me reopen this right quick, because the word purpose, what does purpose mean? So let me tell you this right quick. Purpose, and I'll go over this again next week. Purpose is a noun. It says a subject under discussion or an action in course of execution. And when you use it as a verb, it's to propose as an aim to oneself. So if you look in John 3:8, 1 John 3:8. And I'm going to snip this short, but this is what it says. I'm reading from the New American Standard. It says, the Son of God appeared for this purpose, to destroy the works of the devil. The key word in that being purpose. The Son of God appeared for this purpose, to destroy the works of the devil. That's a pretty emphatic statement, don't you think? He came for that purpose. Now, there were a lot of other purposes too, but that's one of the keys right there. What are we supposed to do? Run riot with the devil and just go crazy with it? Oh, I'm saved, I got dunked. Say a few prayers and throw a couple of bucks in the basket and I'm good to go. Who cons who on that? We got to be very, very careful with this, because we'll discuss the word purpose quite a bit more here. So what is your purpose once you've been baptized? Just go on your merry way and I don't need to open this up anymore. I got what I need. You got to study it. And the more you study it, the more you comprehend. The more you comprehend, the more you understand how important it is to know this, because that's what helps shape your character. To be a good, true, and honest person. And on and on. All the good things you can think of. Anything I've said that's wrong, please let me know. Any questions, let me know also. Thank you.